And a short time ago, Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer and other Democrats started to lay out their $1 trillion infrastructure plan for the country.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody. And we have many more of my colleagues coming. But as you know, we have a whole lot of hearings, so they're going to come in as they come. But we have myself, Senator Sanders, Carper, Nelson, Brown, Leahy, Cantwell, and Wyden all speaking. You will each speak briefly on this very important issue. So when President Trump was candidate Trump, at almost every stop on the campaign trail, he talked about a big, bold $1 trillion infrastructure bill that would put millions of Americans back to work rebuilding our roads and bridges. That is something that congressional Democrats have sought for years, but congressional Republicans have stymied us at every turn. Today, we Senate Democrats are unveiling a blueprint to rebuild America's infrastructure and create 15 million jobs. And we're challenging President Trump to support our plan. He campaigned on a promise of bigger and better infrastructure. This plan is the way to make it happen. This is a major effort to tackle our nation's most critical infrastructure needs in rural and urban communities, rebuilding schools and VA health facilities, while also repairing roads, bridges, and waterways. We take on sewers and airports, public and tribal lands. This bill would mean three things for this country: jobs, jobs, and more jobs, and good-paying jobs to boot. As this bill hopefully moves forward, Democrats are going to fight for environmental and labor protections. We will not support tax credits for developers. We will insist that labor and raw materials come from America, just as the President promised in his campaign. And we will not cut middle-class programs like education and health care to pay for it. We have heard President Trump's talk of disaster and third world infrastructure, and we agree something must be done. So we hope the President will join us in supporting this blueprint to rebuild America's infrastructure and create 15 million jobs. And we call on the President to persuade his Republican colleagues in the House and Senate to drop their opposition to investing in infrastructure and get on board with this plan. With that, let me call on Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Look, this is kind of a no-brainer. Whether you're in the state of Vermont or the state of California, you understand that our infrastructure is crumbling. Our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our airports, our levees, and our dams. What we need to do is to invest $1 trillion over the next 10 years to rebuild that crumbling infrastructure. We used to lead the world. The United States was number 1 in the quality of our infrastructure. Today, we are number 12. And when we rebuild our infrastructure, we rebuild the middle class, because we can create up to 15 million decent-paying jobs in all areas of life, in urban America, in rural America, for all of our people. President Trump campaigned on rebuilding the infrastructure. Let's do it, but let's do it in a way that does not provide huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country and to the largest corporations. I hope very much that this is an issue where all of us can get together, because it's certainly something the American people want. Thank you.
Senator Carper.
Thank you, Senator Schumer.
People have to go because they have hearings, we understand.
Yeah. I come before you today as a recovering governor. I've been one for a number of years, and focused for much of my adult life on creating nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. That's maybe the most important thing that we do in government. It includes a focus on workforce, making sure we have the kind of worker skills that are needed, that we're investing in research and development that actually leads to creation and innovation, that we protect the intellectual capital that is created, that we focus on public safety, and that we provide certainty and predictability for businesses through our tax code and through the regulations that we write and promulgate. We need clean air, we need clean water, and we need access, folks need access to decisions makers like us and to governors and mayors and others across the country. And we need an infrastructure system that works. That's the kind of infrastructure that we need not in the last century or the century before that, but for the 21st century. We learn every year from Texas A&M that people in this country literally sit in traffic for almost 48 hours a year. Sit there, not moving at 5 or 10 miles an hour. We sit there. Individuals, families, businesses, including businesses that are trying to move product from one side of our country or one side of our city or one side of our state to the other. The GDP growth that we will realize from the kind of investment that we're discussing here today, proposing here today, is not just from putting millions of people back to work, millions of people who have skills, who actually could do this work, would like to do this kind of work, rebuilding our infrastructure, but actually comes from being able to make our economy work more efficiently, work more effectively, and by getting rid of the traffic jams, the backlogs, and so forth that exist in my state and in states across the country. That's where this works. The Global Institute of the McKinsey and Company has estimated we will grow, if we actually make an investment for 20 years, that actually is 1% of GDP per year for our infrastructure writ broadly, we will create about 1.5 million jobs per year. We will grow our GDP by 1.5% per year for 20 years. That's a pretty good bargain. Thank you.
Okay. Every one of these members is a ranking member of the relevant committee. It has broad jurisdiction.
Yeah, EPW. Let me introduce Bill Nelson, who is the ranking member on Commerce. Bill Nelson, Florida. Thank you.
Florida is growing at 1,000 people a day net. That's 365,000 a year. That's, in the term of a senator, 6 years, that's over 2 million people. Now you can imagine what that crunch is doing to the need of infrastructure, not even to speak of the dozen bridges that we have that are about to fall down. So it's time for infrastructure. I wish back in the stimulus bill when we finally got some infrastructure that had been a lot more, and we got voted down on that. But now we have an opportunity because the president has said he wants $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Now we have a chance to do it. Do you know that the sea level is rising? And in South Florida, what that is causing is not only huge multi-million-dollar projects of pumps to get the water out of the streets, for example, in Miami Beach, but the cities along the Gulf Coast now having to move their water well system further west because the salt water has intruded. That costs millions and millions of dollars. Well, what about when the rains come and Lake Okeechobee, like a bowl, starts to fill up, but the dike that's been there for 40 years is suddenly doesn't have the integrity it should? We need to shore up that whole dike of Lake Okeechobee. That's $1 billion+. We desperately need an infrastructure bill.
Senator Brown is at his committee hearing. Next is Senator Leahy of Appropriations Committee.
Thank you. And Chuck, thanks for doing this. In about a week when we reorganize the Appropriations Committee, I'll become vice chairman of it, and I am really looking at every single account we can use. We need to invest this way. We need to bring our roads, our bridges, our rails back, but we have to make sure we do it all over the country, not just our physical infrastructure. We have to rebuild our schools. We have to expand broadband access, especially in rural areas. We have to bolster our water and sewer systems. We rebuild and revitalize our downtowns. I look at that with the difference in weather in my own state of Vermont. This morning we had a major ice storm in parts of our state. People are still going to go to work. They're going to be able to do it because we have the roads. But those roads are hit every single time. Often it's a single bridge that may connect a small community to such essential services as grocery stores or health services or education opportunities. We will join together. I'll make sure that it's not just urban areas, which absolutely need the help, but our rural areas that are so much of the fabric of our country. We can do it. You know, we spent a lot more money than this on a war in Iraq, which we paid for in a credit card. Let's start building things at home. I remember during that war, people would come up to me in Vermont and say, appears to me you guys spend any kind of money you want to build roads and bridges over there, and then they blow them up. Build them here in Vermont. We'll take care of them. But you could say that build them in Ohio or Minnesota or Florida or New York. We'll take care of it. And make sure we do it in a way, not make them public structures so that the taxpayers don't have to pay twice to go on the road. They're already paying enough. Now, we'll go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Senator Cantwell.
I'm seated in any seat.
Thank you, Senator Leahy, and thank you, Senator Schumer, for organizing this investment in infrastructure to create jobs in America. I'm here to talk about the energy infrastructure investment, which is about making an investment in energy that will help us save consumers money, grow our economy, and create jobs. What are we talking about specifically? We are talking about things like transmission lines, grid modernization, grid storage, microgrid investment, all important cybersecurity investment, and making sure that critical assets like hospitals, ports, and our military bases can fight against those kinds of attacks. We're also talking about smart building infrastructure that puts intelligence into those buildings in saving costs on key issues like heating and cooling that are so much the cost of industry, and making sure that the next phase of distribution systems with advanced controls help consumers and manufacturers keep down the costs while integrating renewable energy, which are cleaner and more efficient savings to the grid. In 2014, $23.5 billion was invested in building energy efficiency. In that same year, American homeowners and businesses saved approximately $70 billion in energy bills due to energy efficiency. So we know this kind of infrastructure investment that is the next stage of our smart grid infrastructure not only produces great jobs, it also saves money and helps our businesses and homeowners be competitive. And it allows our consumers to take advantage of these savings for their homes as well. So I applaud my colleagues for this key investment. We look forward to having it discussed and move ahead. As the quadrennial review from the past Obama administration showed, there are so many energy infrastructure jobs of the future. We need to get on with making sure that we capture them. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Wyden is at a hearing, so Senator Brown and Wyden, if they come, will come. Now, I heard we had a technical difficulty, so you may not have gotten the press release, which has all the details. I'm just going to read you where the numbers go quickly. $210 billion crumbling roads and bridges, 2.7 million jobs, $110 billion water and sewer, 2.5 million jobs, $180 billion rail and bus systems, 2.5 million jobs, $200 billion vital infrastructure programs to get major projects moving, 2.6 billion, $75 billion to rebuild America's schools, 975,000 jobs, $65 billion ports, airports, waterways, 845,000 jobs, $100 billion energy infrastructure, 1.3 million new jobs, $20 billion expanding broadband, 260,000, $20 billion backlogs on public and tribal lands, 260 billion, $10 billion VA hospitals in extended care, 130,000, and $10 billion in new innovative financing tools, 1.3 million. Questions, but we're just doing them on this subject because we're having our post-leadership press conference where you can do it on others. Andrew.
Senator, to what degree are you stymied by the deficit, which the new report from the Congressional Budget Office is that it'll rise to $8 trillion? Doesn't that give Speaker Ryan and McConnell cover to say, we'd love to help you, but the deficit's too high?
Well, look, many of we Democrats believe that this should be a measure to get the economy going, as we have done all along, whether it's Franklin D. Roosevelt or Henry Clay, before they even had Republicans who first proposed this. This is a job-creating bill. And as for how we pay for it, we will discuss that with President-elect Trump, but many of us believe that it should just be used to create jobs, not to take money away. And I'd say to some of our Republican colleagues, do you feel the same way about tax cuts for the rich? Are they all going to be paid for? I doubt it. Yes.
Leader Schumer, you said that Republicans are standing in the way on this, but I asked Speaker Ryan about this morning, and he said we want to be as expansive as we possibly can with respect to infrastructure. The size will be determined by the fiscal space we create in our spring budget, but our goal is to leverage as much as possible. That doesn't sound like somebody who doesn't want an infrastructure plan.
Let's see his plan. Sounds to me like he doesn't. Sounds like me he has a million caveats.
So in the past, you've tried to pay for this by repatriation of corporate profits. Is that what you have in mind right now?
We will discuss and negotiate with President-elect Trump. Oh, sorry, I'm so used to calling him President-elect. President Trump, the methods of paying for it. Here's some things. We don't believe we should pay. We don't believe we should cut middle-class other programs. Often Ryan talks about that. Education, health care, which will stymie it. Some Democrats believe we should close a lot of tax loopholes to pay for it, and many more believe that we should have this as an investment, as Maria said, and do it as has been done in the past to create jobs and not take money out of the economy. Sherrod Brown is the head of our banking committee, which has jurisdiction over mass transit and housing. I'm going to let him say a few words. He was at a hearing.
Thank you, Chuck. Our parents and grandparents left us. They dreamed of, they designed, and they built the best infrastructure, the best transportation system in the history of the world. The world had never seen anything, particularly from World War II into the 1980s. President Trump, we in this generation have not maintained, not even kept up what they built. President Trump promised a $1 trillion investment in American infrastructure, built with American iron and steel, made by American workers. This blueprint that we are unveiling will hold the president accountable for keeping that promise. We stand ready to work with the president to make it a reality. It's time to put Americans to work across my state, across the country, with real investments, not gimmicks, not tolls, not corporate giveaways. Last week, on Friday, the president's first day in office, I introduced legislation to apply Buy America to all taxpayer-funded infrastructure and public works. Wherever there are federal dollars in highways, bridges, water and sewer systems, plain and simple, American tax dollars should go toward American-made products that support American jobs. It invests in rebuilding main streets in Cleveland and Appalachia and across our country, from Seattle to New York. It would help us complete big ticket projects. The Brent Spence Bridge, connecting Mitch McConnell's state with mine in Cincinnati, carries 4% of GDP every single day, and it's a bridge that's almost 60 years old. A quarter of Americans who rent their homes spend more than half their income on housing. In cities like my hometown of Cleveland, too many families struggle to recover from the foreclosure crisis. Imagine that. Half your income's in housing, how precarious your life is. One piece of bad luck, you lose your home, your kids change their schools, all the kinds of things where life turns upside down. This plan would address the urgent need for affordable housing. It would rehabilitate more than 1 million old homes contaminated with lead, like the homes in my neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. It would help communities remove abandoned homes that lower property value and increase crime. It would update our sewer and water infrastructure. All reasons that this legislation is so very, very important.
Thank you, Sherrod. We'll continue with questions. Yes.
Thank you. What about this idea, though? We heard what the president said on the campaign trail on infrastructure. We've heard mostly things about health care and today the pipeline and things like that. Are you more concerned here about trying to get ahead of the game here and forcing him into this, or saying, look, you said this on the campaign trail, Mr. President, let's make...
We're challenging him today to join us. We agree. Democrats have been talking about this. There have been some bills to do this long before Donald Trump was campaigning for the presidency. But now that we've been stymied by our Republican colleagues, Senator Ryan, Leader McConnell, who has reiterated over and over again that he can't see doing such a large bill because of because of this, that, and the other thing. Now we have a president-elect who has called for a large infrastructure bill. We're challenging him to join us, even if his Republican colleagues in the House and Senate aren't for it. You may remember that for 5 years they held up a highway bill that was much smaller than this one.
Senator Schumer, what percentage of this bill would you be willing to go for tax incentives for private-public partnerships?
We think the tax incentives and private-public partnerships hardly build anything that's really needed. They would go to places that could be built right now with municipal bonds and other things. We don't want all the benefits of this going to developers and to wealthy people. And we feel that you're going to need a robust investment in infrastructure, period. No ands, ifs, or buts. So we're not going to negotiate now, but a bill that relies on those kinds of tax credits would not meet our favor.
And specifically, what
No, let me just go on.
Senator, you spoke with President Trump at length after his inauguration. You met with him last night. Have you directly discussed an infrastructure
I have,
bill with him?
and he seems open to a bill that's this large. And I told him repeatedly, if you want to do a bill like this, you're going to have to tell a lot of your Republicans, particularly on the right wing, that they're not going to get their way, and he acknowledged that. So we'll see what happens, but that's what he did. And I was told yesterday by some of the labor leaders who were there that they said we need to maintain protections for labor, so these are good-paying jobs, and he didn't oppose it. He's open to it.
Senator Schumer.
Yes, lady in the back.
Senator
Thank you.
Schumer,
That's you.
how will money be doled out for broadband expansion?
Hmm?
How will the money be doled out for expanding
Well,
broadband?
we have not. This is a blueprint, and we've discussed this with our 8 or 9 ranking committee members. We will then start filling in the details, and you'll see more of that down the road. Okay? Yes.
To follow up to that other question, I did hear that infrastructure came up last night at the meeting with the president. So you talked about Trump's response. What did McConnell and Ryan say in that conversation?
Okay. I don't want to report on what they said specifically because that's their liberty at a private meeting. But McConnell's position hasn't changed, and he has been in the past, and nothing has changed, very negative. Yes.
Do you have a plan for how to decide which projects will get funded?
When we fill in the details, you'll get that. Yes.
Do you see, you talked about using American labor and raw materials. Do you see a major expansion to Buy America law?
Absolutely. That is one of our, I mentioned 3 or 4 of our bottom lines. That's one of them.
Do you think at the expense of international trading rules?
I'm not I join the president in not being a big fan of international trading rules. That's speaking for myself. Yes.
Considering that Trump's plan that he proposed through the campaign was paid for through tax incentives, do you actually see a big gap?
It's not paid for. Now, you've got to distinguish that. You have to pay for tax incentives, too, giving people big tax breaks. So it's not a pay for, it's a method of financing. We don't like that method of financing because, A, it doesn't build things in 90% of the cases where it's needed, and B, then a lot of the expense that you go to goes in the pockets of developers and very wealthy financiers, and it creates tolls everywhere because you have to have a pay-for back. That's not been the American tradition. Ask Dwight D. Eisenhower. He had to make that decision. A nice Republican president. One more. Yes, way in the back.
Do you expect repatriation to be a central funding source for this?
You know, look, some of us, Sherrod, myself, Tom Carper, Mark Warner, have explored that. It's not going to be close to enough to funding what we need, even if it were included. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great.